The men, for they were all men, all German soldiers, adjusted white shirts, positioned chairs, fine-tuned strings, tuned sheet music. A small choir moved into place behind the instruments, while the gathering audience took their seats. The conductor positioned the baton to let Beethoven's Ninth invade Japanese sensibility. Molto vivace, too. The premiere was grand, grandeur itself. I suspect far grander in your head than what we heard, and what we heard was grand. What did you hear? Your music rushed above and without you, soared above everyone in the house, soared above and without time. The music finished ahead of your baton, which waved until the contralto grabbed your arm, turned you around to see the crowd on its feet, waving hats, scarves, handkerchiefs, all the applause an eye can hear. You moved more than 60 times in 35 years throughout Vienna, as hard on landlords as maids. You were seen as bad-tempered, surly, stubborn, vulgar, erratic, egocentric, in continual argument with the world. Well, who hasn't been there? On bad days, people talk to you in notebooks. On good days, you talk with yourself, turning away from self-pity and complaint, words transformed into ideas, notes, holes in the black pall of doubt and longing that hover over human hours. Into Blitz, while you strolled with Goethe, an entourage of nobility walked toward you. The great poet stepped aside deferentially, but you pressed ahead so that the aristocrats stepped aside for you. You explained to Goethe later, there are countless nobles, but only two of us. Adagio molto e cantabile. Poems have a brief shelf life, only optimism has one shorter. Friedrich Schiller wrote An der Freude about optimism, a poor strategy for immortality. Pick any spot on the daily spin, optimism looks out of place there. You won't have to walk far to find the boot prints of oppressors on the backs of the vanquished. Humanity sees itself as the period in nature's experiment with life, an argument not likely to sustain. In humanity's defense, despite eons without the slightest inkling of such a thing, someone invented art, and someone noticed it. Artists and art join in combat as fierce as that fought on any field, and the prize just as ill-defined. Art is optimism made manifest, the hope that the best in us will outlast the worst in us. Schiller believed his poem a failure, detached from reality. He, more than most, must have suspected reality is often aspirational. The number 4 finale, Ode to Joy, Daiku. Just a moment to explain Daiku. I explained how it's used in this section, but it's the Japanese nickname for the Ninth Symphony. It means the Big Nine. Let's see. I would have sung that for you, but with my voice, you would have left. Trust me. Every December across Japan, dozens of orchestras perform the ninth. Thousands of voices charge winter with the ebullient urging of those foreign words. Listening to the fourth movement, that first time in my apartment, I didn't know German. I don't know German now. The voices formed another instrument, an exquisite layer of resonances sweeping over my senses. A fiber of electricity entered me, passed through me, and reached to the flame of notes flaring into space. I sat, eyes closed, transported out of thought. The arena in Osaka fills with 10,000 singers, sopranos, alters, tenors, basses, men, women, young, old, practicing in small groups for months. And now the entirety converges here for one night, one sublime night, to inhabit a vision of drama, invention, and triumph. The voices and glorious music ascend as witness that the year's adversities have once again been overcome. The chorus and orchestra resolve to do it all again, as every year brings a new set of hardships to survive. Human beings haven't had a good year in a long time. At this moment, everyone is fire and elation, joy, daring to think the world could go on. Against every obscene bit of evidence from the last century and what foul crumbs have collected to now of this one, people begin to feel the world might go on after all. Manhã Mangro de Heroísmo. This is Portuguese, which is my ancestry, and I say that as if I'm a Portuguese speaker, but alas not. Angra de Heroísmo is the capital city of Terceira, which is the island in the Azores archipelago, where three of my grandparents came from. Hair dampened by drizzle, I sip café, the lone person at an outside table. The insiders with dry cloths don't bother to look at one more crazy turista soaking up local color off wet streets. Café strives to recover the buried vocabulary of a 3-year-old to help me feel more like I belong here. Here, Angra, capital of Terceira, the small island where my father's father grew to the firm edges of adulthood, where he learned a child's song about Rosa twirling her skirt, which he taught me to sing for his amusement, and that of the men hired for day work in the alfalfa field. The song seemed innocent, but the men laughed as though the words hid an adult secret, what men's laughter always tries to convey. I laughed with them, as if I knew it too. They resumed work, convinced of their future. Disillusionment came for their future, as it comes for everyone, though some joy could still wrest itself from the more of grief, which could not rest, such the tempers of earth. In due course, the mist lifted into sunlight, hair dried in its heat, words of reflection escorted me across the cobblestones. Cobbles my grandfather may well have walked, pursuing the stretch of his destiny. And so our separate paths crossed again. His hard years seemed not as callous as mine, his world more comprehensible than mine, though I couldn't know that with certainty. locked in strict blinders of self-importance through which I watched only my life burning. As I stepped onto the ancient shadows of buildings little changed for centuries, I felt my grandfathers, walking there beside me, our lives the same. I walked downhill to the end of the street to see the ocean and smell the ocean breeze. No one ever walks far from the sea here. The air held the cry of gulls, some car horns and a bell calling the faithful to Mass. Noises so humble few paid attention. Every voice, every smell, every view aroused the familiar and comforted. Every face a relative or a friend. Each person tethered to every person. I only came to see from where I came and found, to my surprise, I had come home.
Okay.
Well, I'm a narrative poet, as you can tell, so my poems tell little stories, and they don't need a lot of explaining, I don't think. History, past, and future. When a person makes up their past, the particulars, though not strictly history, lay down quite an impressive story. Why else would a person bother? It turns out much of what we tell didn't occur. Just things we ask ourselves to believe that reflect wonderful qualities we own, or wish we own, or want others to think we own. Let me tell you something that happened. The man who penned the noble words, "All men are created equal," had 6 children with his wife Martha, 2 of whom survived to adulthood, Martha and Maria, and enslaved more than 600 equal persons, including the woman, his wife's half-sister, who bore him 6 equally enslaved children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. After reaching 21, Beverly and Harriet were let to run away. Madison and Eston were freed in Jefferson's will, their mother Sally not mentioned. Not one of the enslaved children gave a damn for any word their father wrote. Their lives neither uplifted nor diminished. Horses groomed, cotton tended, sustaining strains of a violin practiced to entertain important guests. History is a moving target, after all. Not our collective memory, but our curated memory. Humanity was born in spring, we forget, out of spring rain. Sunsets lingering a bit longer each day, grasses erupting in green eloquence dotted in yellow flowers of wood sorrel. The winds of ambition impelling epochs to swell the ground. Born in spring, the race naturally grew optimistic in the same way everything grew without struggle. Earth's gifts boundless, so humans sold off surfeit optimism in pieces. The first piece to jealousy, the second to entitlement. Now, I'll tell you another thing that happened. 20 soldiers of the U.S. 7th Cavalry, once commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Custer, received Congressional Medals of Honor after their regiment killed over 300 people, mostly unarmed men, women, children, Chief Spotted Elk's, Bigfoot's band of Lakota, while detained under the tribe's white flag of truce. Papers called it the Battle of Wounded Knee, which the Lakota remember as the massacre of the Bigfoot band. Labels a matter of shifting semantics. 25 soldiers also died, most by friendly fire. L. Frank Baum, the Grand Wizard of Oz, on hearing news from Wounded Knee, wrote, "The best safety of the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation